So we tend to use stress, anxiety, tension, all these things interchangeably. In this case, I was going to, I want to distinguish between stress and stressors versus anxiety. And when I think about what stress is or what a stressor is, those are naturally occurring events or situations, and those are healthy. That's something that we all have to deal with. I mean, whether it's running up a flight of stairs, that puts our bodies into stress. Your heart rate's got to rise, and you've got to be paying attention to what you're doing so you don't trip. Or, more classically, that fight or flight, where if you see a bear, of course, you need to start running. With a stress, if you don't respond, there's a real danger. The challenge is that we have to be able to separate that sort of stress and stress response from anxiety. Stress has a stressor has a beginning and an end. So as I said, like if a bear is chasing you, there's a beginning to it. You recognize the bear, you got to get going. And then hopefully there is a successful end to it, where you have escaped the bear rather than finding yourself underneath it. Where anxiety comes in is that it's our response to the stressor, and it's an outsized response. It goes beyond what it should have been. And what's interesting to me is that in a lot of ways, once we have an anxiety response that tends to be maybe more broad, we're not just responding to the one thing that's in front of us, but a lot of times we have a tendency to bring in things that aren't particularly relevant or necessary. So if I was running from a bear, I'm not going to stop and try and figure out what type of trees are in front of me. I just want to know what I can climb. I don't have to say it's a birch tree, it's an oak. I also need to not be thinking about lunch, about what someone said to me yesterday. But with anxiety, we pull in everything all at once. And I think especially for adolescents, where they're just trying to figure out what's what in the world, it's very easy to run into something that is a stressor, something they have to deal with, like, I don't want to go to school today. So there's a specific event that they're trying to deal with. But if they start bringing in a lot of other things like, well, does my best friend really like me or not? Is this a decent outfit? Should I be thinking about a different career? Those are things that are not necessary to dealing with the task of, I have to get to school. But I think that's where anxiety really comes in. And because it's so broad and because it's not really focused, it's also hard to get it to come to an end. When we're mixing up dealing with a stressor versus kind of getting caught in this anxiety response, how do you resolve, I'm not sure what my friend really thinks of me? You can't resolve that between, 7:50 and 8:05. And in that sense, anxiety can keep going and going, and it is draining. It's exhausting. And for adolescents, their lives are pretty busy anyway. They are trying to figure out, they're trying to deal with situations they've never encountered before, because, as much as I might think, well, being 14, that's, I know what that is. Well, if you've never been 14, you don't know what it is. And I think that I find that it's really important to be grounded in the reality that everything is new to some extent, or there's not a lot for adolescents to fall back on. So I think that also makes it easy to be stuck in the anxiety sort of response. One of the things we know about dealing with stressors is that since it's supposed to be kind of a direct, short-term, let's solve this sort of situation, when our body senses that there's a stress to deal with, some things gain priority and other things are kind of pushed down. So if it really is like an emergency, your muscles need to get blood. Your senses need to be dialed up. What do I see? What do I hear? Your heart needs to get pumping. But when we're experiencing anxiety and, it's become this bigger experience, um, having our muscles get going, but we're not going anywhere, well, they just tense up. Um, we're paying attention. I mean, we're taking in all this input. What's that? What did I see? What did I hear? What's that smell? Um, but you can't do that for extended periods of time and still be able to function well. And particularly, the things that get deprioritized um, are really hard to continue to deal with. So you're running or you're dealing with something that's really, urgent. Maybe you're helping a friend cross the street. You see a car coming. Um, at that moment, you're not thinking about eating, so your body kind of shuts down your stomach. If that keeps going, what happens? Stomach aches, a knot in the stomach. Um, if you're in a situation that's really important, I've got to make my flight right now, or I have to get to the bus stop because if I miss the bus, then I can't do what I need to do today. For a kid, well, those are not times you want to fall asleep. But if they are in an anxiety response, body's saying, don't sleep, don't sleep, don't sleep. Well, we've seen that for ourselves, and especially for adolescents who are trying to figure out how to regulate their lives anyway, and don't necessarily have the familiarity that things like eating on a regular basis, keeping a good sleep schedule, they're not quite aware of where that may fit in. And so if they're not sleeping because their body says don't sleep, that creates more problems. It tends to complicate dealing with things cognitively, kind of thinking clearly, dealing with things emotionally. Sleep deprivation is a real problem. And even sleep schedule. This is something I see a lot with, again, with any of us. I mean, adolescents aren't categorically another creature in the universe, but sleep schedule. I had someone the other day say, well, yeah, I mean, I get my 8 hours. And I said, well, okay, when? And he said, well, on the weekends, maybe I'll stay up late, until 1 to 3, and then I'll just sleep to like 11 or so. And then on the weekdays, if I need to go to school, sometimes I'm kind of feeling tense, so I'll wake up at like 4, but then I go to bed at 7 p.m. Well, our bodies just don't function very well that way. And um, what I remember about, being a teen is that um, my body was fairly flexible. I mean, I still could survive with this really crazy sleep schedule, but when it comes to being able to truly function, it's not supportive for our brains. And so an adolescent who's experiencing a lot of anxiety, who's not sleeping regularly, and maybe just not even sleeping enough for their body's needs, it complicates decision making. It complicates being able to regulate emotions.